A life extinguished in seconds. A family's search for answers. A nation grappling with the complexities of policing. The Supreme Court is about to step into the center of a firestorm. This is Barnes versus Felix, a case that could redefine the boundaries of excessive force and reshape the landscape of accountability in America. This isn't just about one case, it's about the fundamental rights of every citizen. On April 2016, a routine traffic stop in Houston, Texas. Officer Roberto Felix pulls over a vehicle, unaware that in the next few moments, his life, and the life of 24-year-old Ashtian Barnes, will change forever. Inside the car, Barnes is startled, his eyes flicking nervously as he begins to roll his car forward while speaking with the officer. The officer, perhaps sensing a threat, reacts swiftly, jumping onto the door sill of the vehicle. In the blink of an eye, the situation escalates into something far more dangerous. The tension in the air thickens as the officer's commands are lost in the chaos. Barnes, unsure of what to do, continues to move his vehicle, his actions only fueling the officer's growing fear. And then, 2 shots ring out, breaking the night in a split second. Barnes is dead at the scene. In that instant, a routine stop has turned into a tragic event. What could have been a simple interaction spirals into a life-ending moment. The question echoes in the silence. Could it have been avoided? No one could have predicted how quickly everything would unfold. The events that unfolded that fateful day have left an indelible mark on a community, on a family, and on a nation. Ashtian Barnes, a young man with dreams, aspirations, and a bright future, became another name added to the tragic list of lives lost under circumstances that would soon spark intense debate. His life, once filled with joy, now reduced to a series of family photos, smiling faces, cherished moments, and love that transcended time, memories that will never fade, but also never be enough to bring him back. In the days following, his family gathered together, holding each other tight in the wake of an unimaginable loss. The pain, raw and unrelenting, became too much to bear. They stood together in a candlelit vigil, a quiet, powerful statement to the world that Ashtian's life mattered, that he was more than just another statistic. Around them, the night air thickened with grief, with questions, and with a burning need for justice. The headlines, however, came quickly. Newspapers ran stories with stark, bold words like, "Police shoot unarmed man during routine stop." Those words echoed in the hearts of millions. But what they didn't capture was the human toll. What they didn't show was the brokenness in the eyes of Ashtian's mother, Janice Hughes, who now faces a world forever changed. She's left with one haunting question that will never go away. Was this an act of excessive force? Or was it a justified response from an officer who found himself facing a situation he couldn't predict? In the midst of her pain, Janice's heart is consumed with the need for answers. She wants to know what led to her son's death. She wants to know how this could have happened. Was there another way? Was this tragedy unavoidable? The police say it was a matter of necessity, an officer's life potentially at risk. But what's the truth? How much of that truth has been left untold? The search for justice, for clarity, began immediately. For Janice, it's a mother's quest to understand the loss, to find some semblance of peace in the chaos, though peace now seems impossible. For the nation, it's a call for accountability, a demand for transparency in a system that must reflect the values of fairness and respect for life. A single tragic incident set into motion questions that would be felt far beyond the boundaries of the police precinct, beyond the community that once felt safe, and far beyond the grief-stricken family left to pick up the pieces. As the investigation unfolds, the debate deepens. Was this an isolated case? Or does it point to a larger issue? Questions continue to swirl, and as the legal system takes center stage, the question remains, what is the right balance of force? How do we define what's excessive and what's justified? In a time when trust in institutions is often shaky, these questions become more than just academic. They become the battleground where justice will be fought. The story of Ashtian Barnes is not just the story of one man's life and death. It is the story of a society struggling to reconcile its values with its actions. It is the story of a mother who lost her son, but also the story of a nation grappling with its own future. In this search for justice, we are all bound together, asking questions, demanding answers, and hoping for a future where no mother, no family, has to face the same heartbreak that Janice Hughes now endures. In the years that followed the tragic encounter, Janice Hughes, devastated yet determined, took on the daunting challenge of filing a civil rights lawsuit against Officer Felix. She accused him of violating her son's Fourth Amendment rights by using excessive force during the incident, an accusation that would set the stage for a legal battle that would stretch far beyond anything she had imagined. The process was anything but straightforward. It was a fight that would demand the utmost resilience from Hughes, as well as the best efforts of her legal team. They knew they were up against a powerful system, one that often favored those in uniform, but they believed in their cause. It wasn't just about her son's tragic death. It was about justice, accountability, and ensuring that something like this could never happen again to another innocent life. But from the outset, the path ahead was rocky. The question at the core of the case was a simple one, yet it was anything but easy to answer. Should Officer Felix's actions be judged solely by the exact moment of the shooting, the split second when he pulled the trigger? Or should the courts look deeper, considering the broader context, everything that had led up to that fatal encounter? This was a critical question, one that could make or break the entire case. The lower courts, however, took a narrow view of the matter. They focused only on the seconds before the officer fired, zeroing in on that critical moment in time. In their eyes, the officer had acted in the heat of the moment, and they ruled that the use of force was justified in that narrow frame. The tragic loss of life was reduced to just a few seconds, a few choices made in haste. For Janice Hughes, this was not enough. She refused to accept this narrow perspective. Her son's life, and the events that led up to his death, deserved more than just a fleeting glance. Her legal team pushed forward, tirelessly working to shift the narrative, to open the eyes of the courts to the larger picture, one that included the flawed interactions, the missed opportunities for de-escalation, and the choices that led to the fatal confrontation. As the legal battle raged on, each court ruling, each twist and turn, only fueled their determination. They knew that the road ahead would be long, and at times, exhausting. But the cause was too important to back down from. Hughes wasn't just fighting for her son anymore. She was fighting for justice, for every individual who had ever been wrongly affected by the abuse of power, for the families who had lost loved ones under circumstances that should never have happened. And so, the legal journey continued, with no clear end in sight. But Hughes and her team were resolute, their commitment to justice unwavering, no matter the obstacles that stood before them. The case was far from over, but the fight had only just begun. And now, the stage is set for a moment of monumental importance. The highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court, is about to weigh in on a case that could reshape the landscape of how excessive force is viewed in this country. The question that has been debated in lower courts, a question that has divided legal minds and left families like Janice Hughes in the pursuit of justice, is now reaching its final frontier. The stakes have never been higher. For years, the legal battle over what constitutes excessive force and when it crosses the line into a violation of civil rights has been a fraught and contentious issue. Officers have often been protected by legal standards that prioritize split-second decisions in life-threatening situations, while families of victims have argued that the broader context, the history, the build-up, the events leading up to those fatal moments, must also be considered. And now, the Supreme Court has the opportunity to revisit and reconsider the lower court's narrow focus. The justices, 9 of them, the highest arbiters of law in the land, are poised to examine the issue through a new lens, one that could forever alter the way excessive force cases are handled. This case, with all its complexities and ramifications, has the potential to influence countless others in the years to come. It is a moment that echoes far beyond this individual case, with implications for every person in this country who has ever feared that justice would not be served when a life is taken by those who are sworn to protect. The justices, from both sides of the ideological spectrum, seem to be aligning on one critical point. The focus must shift. It is no longer enough to look solely at the moment of the shooting, the instant when the officer fired the weapon. No, they agree. The focus must be on the totality of circumstances. The entire series of events that led up to the shooting must be taken into account. The decision to use force, the actions of the officer, the behavior of the suspect, the setting, and everything in between, these elements must all be weighed carefully. This is a recognition of something that many have long believed, that context is everything. It's a recognition that a single moment cannot capture the full reality of a tragic event. For Janice Hughes and her legal team, this could be the breakthrough they've been fighting for. But for the rest of the nation, it is an opportunity to redefine the standard by which law enforcement is held accountable. As the justices walk into the court, a sense of gravity fills the air. This is more than just a legal proceeding. This is a historic opportunity, one that could either reinforce a status quo that many feel is broken, or it could be a landmark decision that shifts the way we think about justice and accountability in this country. The eyes of the nation are watching, waiting for the decision that will reverberate through courtrooms, through law enforcement agencies, and through the lives of ordinary citizens. The future of how excessive force is understood and handled is on the precipice of being rewritten, and in the hands of the highest court, it will soon be decided. This case isn't just about Ashtian Barnes. It's about something far more profound, something that impacts every single American. It's about the fundamental rights that define who we are as a nation. Rights that, at times, feel as though they are being tested in ways we never imagined possible. The question we face now is one that reaches into the very core of what it means to seek justice. How much force is too much when it comes to those who are sworn to protect us? In those moments, when officers must make split-second decisions where the consequences of action or inaction can mean the difference between life and death, how do we hold them accountable? How do we ensure that the law remains a shield for the innocent and not a weapon that threatens the very rights it's meant to protect? In situations like these, decisions are made in the blink of an eye, with little to no time for second-guessing. But what happens when those decisions lead to a tragic loss of life, to a death that could have been prevented? What happens when the person who dies, like Ashtian Barnes, is someone whose story, whose life, might not be remembered if we don't choose to ask these questions? And so, we turn to the case of Barnes versus Felix. A case that might not just be a footnote in a courtroom transcript. This case could be the tipping point that reshapes the very definition of excessive force in America. It could change the way the law looks at situations where officers must act in life-threatening, fast-paced scenarios. This isn't just about one officer's actions. It's about the standards by which we hold all officers accountable. It's about setting new legal precedents for how police conduct is judged in these critical moments, the kind where, sometimes, a few seconds make all the difference. The ruling in this case could redefine how we as a nation measure the use of force in law enforcement. Will it create a standard that emphasizes accountability, holding officers responsible for actions that result in unnecessary harm? Or will it set a precedent that allows officers to act without scrutiny, relying solely on the perception of threat in the heat of the moment, without regard for the broader circumstances that led to that moment? Will this case ensure that those who serve and protect us do so with an unwavering commitment to upholding the rights of all citizens? Or will it reaffirm a status quo that too often fails to deliver justice to those most vulnerable? The implications of this case stretch far beyond the courtroom. They extend into the streets where people protest, demanding justice and equality, into the homes where families grieve losses that should never have occurred. They extend into the hearts and minds of those who wonder if the law can truly serve all people equally, no matter their race, their background, or their past mistakes. It's a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing, that every decision made by those in power carries consequences that ripple out, affecting entire communities and the lives of every citizen. The outcome of Barnes versus Felix could set new standards for how we view the relationship between law enforcement and the people they serve. It could open the door to greater transparency, to policies that make officers more accountable for their actions. Or it could lead us down a path where the power of those with badges is unchecked, and the rights of individuals, especially those whose lives are already marginalized, are continually disregarded. The question is not just about what happens in this one case. It's about what kind of society we want to live in. A society where law enforcement officers are held to the highest standards of conduct, or one where the system protects those who fail to uphold the very rights it's meant to defend. The outcome of this case will shape that future, one way or the other. For Janice Hughes, this case is far more than the simple mechanics of a legal battle. It is a fight for something far deeper, something more visceral, the pursuit of justice for her son, a fight for his memory, for the truth, and for the peace that she believes has been stolen from their family. Each step she takes, each breath she draws in the cold, sterile corridors of the courthouse, is a reminder that what's at stake isn't just a case. It's her son's life, the consequences of that night, and the hope that somehow, through this process, something meaningful can emerge. Janice holds a photo of her son close to her chest, the photograph a symbol of the life that once was, the joy that used to fill their home. With each passing day, as she walks into the courtroom, she carries that image not just in her hands but in her heart, knowing that every word spoken, every argument presented, could bring her closer to understanding, or further into despair. For Janice, the legal jargon, the back and forth of lawyers, the dry recitation of laws and statutes, is something she's forced to navigate, though it feels foreign, cold, detached from the warmth of the love she once shared with her son. She believes, with everything in her, that Officer Felix's actions that night were unnecessary, that there were alternatives, other choices that could have spared her son from the fate he met that evening. But Janice also knows that the legal system doesn't operate on the raw emotion that she carries with her every day. The courts don't bend to a mother's heartbreak. The law doesn't answer to her grief. It answers to laws, precedents, interpretations, rules and guidelines that, while necessary, often feel so distant from the personal devastation she faces. This trial, this pursuit of justice, is not just about what happened in that moment of crisis, not just about what took place that night when everything changed forever. No. It's about what happens next. What will happen to her son's legacy? What will happen to the lives of others who find themselves in situations like his? What will happen when a system that's meant to protect, to safeguard, fails, and one family must pick up the pieces of that failure, piece by piece? In this fight, it's not just about what was taken, it's about what can be given back, what can be restored. Janice's fight is not just for justice, but for a future where something, anything, can be salvaged from the wreckage. The courtroom falls silent as the justices take their seats. On the bench, their expressions are somber, their minds racing through the weight of the case before them. It's a moment of deep reflection, as the highest court in the land wrestles with a question that has far-reaching consequences, not only for the justice system but for law enforcement and communities across the nation. The case before the Supreme Court is no ordinary one. It challenges the very way the law views police use of force. The question is deceptively simple but fraught with complexity. Should the court continue to focus solely on the split-second decisions made by officers in the heat of the moment, or should it expand its perspective to include the entire context leading up to that fateful moment? Should the law consider not just what happened in the blink of an eye, but the decisions, actions, and circumstances that preceded it? As the justices deliberate, the tension in the room is palpable. Justice Elena Kagan, known for her careful analysis and balanced approach, ponders the potential impact of such a shift. What would it mean for the role of law enforcement if every action leading up to the trigger pull becomes a subject of scrutiny? Could officers, already operating in high-stakes environments, be weighed down by the fear that their every move, every decision, every hesitation, would come under intense legal examination? Next to her sits Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a fierce advocate for a legal framework that upholds the rights of officers, but also one who recognizes the broader implications for justice and public safety. He voices concerns about the potential for a chilling effect. What happens if officers begin second-guessing themselves, questioning every moment that leads to the use of force? Will it create a hesitation to act, a hesitation that could put lives at risk, both the officers and the public's? Could this shift in perspective inadvertently make law enforcement more reluctant to engage in situations where they must act swiftly, under extreme pressure? But these concerns are not isolated. The court's challenge isn't just theoretical. It reverberates across the nation, where police officers are often faced with life-and-death decisions in fractions of a second. The risk, as some justices have pointed out, is that placing too much emphasis on the moments before the trigger is pulled could distort the reality of policing in America. Officers are trained to make decisions quickly, often without the luxury of hindsight or the ability to consider every possible variable. In the heat of the moment, they must act to protect themselves, their colleagues, and the public at large. How can we truly evaluate their actions when the circumstances are so unpredictable, so fluid? At the heart of this debate lies the tension between accountability and understanding. How much responsibility should fall on the shoulders of police officers, knowing they are tasked with maintaining order and public safety in the most dangerous and unpredictable of environments? And how much latitude should they have in making split-second decisions, knowing that their choices, made in the blink of an eye, can be second-guessed by courts, the public, and the media? The justices recognize that the decision they make will have profound implications, not just for this case but for future cases that may deal with similar questions. If they broaden the scope of what is considered in these cases, will they make it more difficult for officers to do their jobs? Or will they provide a clearer standard for accountability, one that better reflects the complexity of police work and the lives at stake? This case is more than a legal debate. It's a conversation about the role of law enforcement in a society that demands both justice and security. It is a conversation about how we balance the need for accountability with the need for safety. It is a conversation about trust, the trust we place in those who are sworn to protect us, and the trust we place in the system to fairly evaluate their actions. As the justices continue to listen intently, their minds are not just focused on the legal arguments before them, but on the larger implications for the law, for law enforcement, and for the communities they serve. The challenge before them is one that goes to the very core of how we, as a society, define justice, and how we hold accountable those who hold the power to make life-or-death decisions in our name. And as they deliberate, the nation watches closely, knowing that whatever decision they make will echo far beyond the walls of this courtroom. The larger implications of this case extend far beyond the courtroom and the individuals directly involved. It reaches into every community, every neighborhood, every person who interacts with the law. Across the vast cities of America, whether it's the bustling streets of New York, the sun-drenched avenues of Los Angeles, or the quiet towns scattered across the heartland, the shadow of this issue looms over us all. Every citizen, no matter their background, is part of the fabric of this unfolding story. And as they go about their daily lives, from walking down the street to driving to work, there's an underlying tension. A tension that goes beyond the immediate. It's about trust, about safety, and, most importantly, about justice. Picture, for a moment, the scene when a police officer pulls someone over. A simple traffic stop, yet the weight of that moment can be life-altering. The officer knows that the choices they make in those crucial seconds could define not only the outcome of the stop, but also the public's trust in their actions. They must think quickly, act with confidence, but always be aware that one wrong move can have devastating consequences. It's not just about enforcing the law, it's about ensuring that their actions are protected, that their decisions are justified in the eyes of a system that is supposed to be impartial and fair. But will it be? Will the law, when it comes time to decide, stand behind the officer if their choices lead to harm? The weight of that uncertainty is a heavy burden, not just for law enforcement but for everyone. And then there's the citizen, the person who's being stopped, questioned, or even detained. They too carry a question that lingers, that gnaws at them with every encounter. What does justice look like in these moments of vulnerability? When someone is treated with suspicion or fear, when they're unsure whether their rights will be respected, or if they will be seen as innocent until proven guilty. What does justice look like when the consequences of a single interaction can ripple out, changing lives forever? This isn't just a theoretical concern, it's a lived reality. The fear of injustice, the fear of losing one's life or liberty, or simply being treated unfairly, is something people carry with them every single day. And for many, this fear becomes a part of their identity, a constant companion in every interaction with law enforcement. The questions are endless, and the stakes are high. What does justice look like when the systems in place to protect us seem flawed, or worse, seem to disproportionately favor one group over another? What does it mean to trust the law, to believe in its fairness, when the evidence suggests that, for some, the law is not always just? For every person watching, for every person involved, this case is a reminder that justice is not just about one individual or one event, it's about all of us. It's about how we view our communities, how we view those who serve and protect us, and how we, as a society, respond when the system fails. In the end, the question remains for us all: will justice be served? And who gets to decide? As we turn our gaze toward the future, one undeniable truth lingers in the air: the impact of the Supreme Court's decision will echo far beyond this courtroom. The ruling, once handed down, will send ripples throughout the justice system, compelling the case to return to the lower courts for more scrutiny and deliberation. But in the grand scheme of things, what does this all mean for the future of policing in America? Will this case mark a pivotal shift in how we define and understand the limits of excessive force? Will it challenge long-standing norms and redefine the standards of accountability, pushing the boundaries of what we once thought possible? And most crucially, will it steer us toward a justice system that holds all individuals, law enforcement included, to a higher standard, demanding responsibility and ensuring fairness for all? The questions are vast, the stakes enormous, and the answers uncertain. But one thing is clear: the path we choose from here could very well shape the future of policing and justice in this country for generations to come. As the nation watches, one thing is certain: the Supreme Court will have the final word on a case that could change the way we understand justice in America. This is not just about one man's death, it's about ensuring that the pursuit of justice is real, tangible, and accountable for everyone. Will we see true justice served, or will it slip through the cracks of a broken system? Only time will tell. If you find this case interesting, do like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more update.